The woman appeared at the fence line just after dawn, her dress torn and dusty, her dark hair escaping its pins in wild tangles that caught the first light of morning across the Arizona territory. Jackson Wells stood on his porch with a cup of coffee gone cold in his hand, watching her stumble through the high grass of his property like she had been walking all night. He set down his cup and moved toward her with long strides, his boots crunching over the dry earth as he approached. She looked up when she heard him coming, and her face held such exhaustion and fear that something in his chest tightened despite his natural wariness of strangers. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse and cracking. "I am so sorry for trespassing on your land. I did not mean to intrude. I have been walking since yesterday evening, and I lost my way in the dark." Jackson stopped a few feet from her, close enough to see the scratches on her arms and the way her legs trembled beneath her skirts. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with striking green eyes that held both intelligence and desperation. Her accent carried the cultured tones of someone educated back east, completely out of place in this harsh stretch of land between Wilcox and the mountains. "You are a long way from anywhere," he said quietly. "Where were you trying to go?" "There was supposed to be a stage coach," she replied, swaying slightly on her feet. "I was traveling to meet my uncle in Tucson, but the driver said there was trouble on the road ahead. He left me at a way station about 15 miles back, said he would return with a different route. That was 2 days ago. I waited as long as I could, but the water ran out." Jackson saw her eyes lose focus and stepped forward just as her knees buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground, feeling how light she was, how her body had been pushed past its limits. Without a word, he lifted her into his arms and carried her toward his house, a simple but sturdy ranch home he had built with his own hands 5 years ago when he first claimed this land. The interior was sparse but clean, furnished with handmade furniture and the basic necessities of a man living alone. He laid her on his bed, the only real bed in the house, and went to fetch water and food. When he returned, her eyes were open again, tracking his movements with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "I should not be here," she whispered. "This is not proper." "Proper will not matter much if you die of thirst," Jackson replied, offering her the water. "Drink slowly." She obeyed, taking small sips while watching him over the rim of the cup. He found himself studying her in return, noting the fine quality of her dress despite its current state, the delicate bones of her wrists, the way she held herself with a certain dignity even in her weakened condition. "What is your name?" he asked. "Olivia," she said. "Olivia Jenkins. Jackson Wells. This is my land, about 3,000 acres running up to the base of those mountains you can see from the window. You were walking in the wrong direction for Tucson." Her face fell. "I thought I was following the road." "No road out here, just cattle trails and dry washes. You are lucky you did not run into a rattlesnake or worse." "I feel foolish," Olivia said, her cheeks coloring, "and I am truly sorry for trespassing. I know how seriously people take their property rights out here. When I am strong enough, I will leave and trouble you no more." Jackson pulled a chair close to the bedside and sat down, studying her with an intensity that made her look away. "You said you came to ask forgiveness for trespassing." "I am saying you do not need forgiveness for trying to survive, and I am saying something else too." She met his eyes again, questioning. "You belong here with me," he said simply. "At least until you are well enough to travel safely. Could be a week or more before another stagecoach comes through, and even then, you would need to get back to that way station. This is not country for a woman alone. I cannot possibly impose on your hospitality for that long," Olivia protested, trying to sit up and failing. "It is not an imposition," Jackson said. "It is the right thing to do, And truth be told, I could use the company. Been 3 years since I had a conversation with anyone that lasted longer than buying supplies in town. 3 years. Olivia's eyes widened. You live out here completely alone. The cattle are not much for talking, Jackson replied with a hint of a smile, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines that weather and solitude had carved there. He was handsome, she realized, in a rough-hewn way that matched this wild country. Perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that needed cutting and gray eyes that seemed to see more than most men. Over the next few days, Olivia slowly regained her strength. Jackson proved to be a surprisingly attentive caretaker, bringing her meals at regular intervals and checking on her with a gentle concern that seemed at odds with his weathered appearance. He gave her his bed and slept on the floor in the main room without complaint, rising before dawn to tend his cattle and returning at midday to make sure she had everything she needed. On the third day, she felt strong enough to leave the bed for more than a few minutes. Jackson had left fresh water in the basin and laid out one of his clean shirts for her to wear while he mended her dress. She washed carefully, wincing at her reflection in the small mirror on the wall. Her face was sunburned and scratched, her hair a disaster, but her eyes looked clearer than they had since arriving. When she emerged from the bedroom wearing his oversized shirt over her chemise and petticoat, Jackson was at the stove cooking something that smelled wonderful. He glanced over his shoulder and something flickered in his expression before he turned back to his work. "You should not be up yet," he said. "I cannot lie in bed forever," Olivia replied, moving slowly to the table. "And I feel much better. What are you making?" "Stew." "Nothing fancy, but it will put some strength back in you." She watched him work, noting the economical grace of his movements, the way he seemed completely comfortable in this domestic task. "Where did you learn to cook?" "Necessity. My mother died when I was 12 and my father was not much interested in keeping house. I learned to fend for myself early." "I am sorry about your mother." Jackson shrugged, but she saw the tightness around his eyes. "Long time ago now. What brought you to Arizona?" she asked. "Same thing that brings most men out here. Fresh start. Left Texas after the war, drifted for a while, ended up claiming this land when it opened for homesteading. Built this place from nothing." "It is a good house," Olivia said sincerely. "Solid, meant it to last." He brought 2 bowls to the table and sat across from her. "What about you? What is a woman with your education doing traveling alone to Tucson?" Olivia stirred her stew, gathering her thoughts. "My uncle wrote that he needed help running his store. My parents died last year, both of them within 3 months of each other, and I had no other family back in Philadelphia. My uncle is my mother's brother, and he offered me a home and work. It seemed like a chance to start fresh, as you said. I am sorry about your parents. Thank you." She met his eyes. "It has been a difficult year." They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Olivia found herself relaxing in a way she had not expected. There was something deeply calm about Jackson Wells, a steadiness that made her feel safe despite being alone with a strange man in the middle of nowhere. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Ask." "Why did you say I belong here with you, when I first arrived?" Jackson set down his spoon and studied her for a long moment. "Honest answer, please." "Because when I saw you standing there, asking forgiveness for something that needed no forgiveness, something in me recognized something in you. Loneliness recognizes loneliness. And I thought, here is someone who understands what it means to be lost and looking for a place to belong. Maybe I was wrong." "You were not wrong," Olivia said softly. "I have felt lost since my parents died, like I am just drifting, waiting to wash up somewhere." "Then maybe you washed up in the right place." Their eyes held across the table, and Olivia felt something shift in her chest, a flutter of possibility she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. She looked away first, suddenly shy. The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Olivia grew stronger, and Jackson allowed her to help with small tasks around the house. She discovered he had a small garden struggling in the harsh soil, and she took over its care, coaxing the plants with careful watering and weeding. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about their lives and dreams. Jackson told her about his childhood in Texas, about learning to work cattle from his father despite their difficult relationship, about the horrors he had seen during the war that made him want to find someplace far from other people. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her love of books and learning, about the progressive school where she had been allowed to study subjects usually reserved for men. "My father believed women should be educated," she explained one evening as the sky turned purple and gold. "He said ignorance was the enemy of freedom." "Smart man," Jackson said. "Out here, education does not matter as much as knowing how to survive, but I always regretted not learning more. Can you teach me to read better? I know my letters, but the books I have are slow going." "You have books?" Olivia turned to him in surprise. He looked almost embarrassed. "A few. Bought them in Wilcox thinking I would have time to read, but they mostly just sit on the shelf." "Show me." He led her inside and pointed to a rough shelf near his bed. There were 5 books, their spines worn. A Bible, a collection of Shakespeare's plays, a volume of poetry by Whitman, a farming manual, and surprisingly, a copy of Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre. Olivia pulled it down carefully, delighted. The bookseller in Wilcox said it was popular. "I liked the sound of it, something about a governess and a mysterious house. Only made it through the first few chapters, though." "It is wonderful," Olivia said. "We could read it together if you like. I could help you with the difficult words." So began another evening ritual. After supper, they would sit by lamplight and Olivia would read aloud while Jackson listened, sometimes asking her to explain a word or phrase. She loved watching his face as the story unfolded, seeing his reactions to the characters and their struggles. There was an unexpected intelligence in him, a quick mind that had simply lacked opportunity. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Olivia knew she should ask Jackson to take her to Wilcox, to find out about the stage coach schedule, to continue her journey to her uncle in Tucson. But every time she thought about leaving, something held her back. The truth was, she had never felt more content than she did here on this remote ranch with this quiet, thoughtful man. Jackson seemed in no hurry to see her go either. He found reasons to keep her busy, teaching her to ride one of his gentler horses, showing her how to spot good grazing land, explaining his plans to expand his herd. She learned to make bread in his temperamental oven, to mend his work shirts, to find beauty in the stark landscape that surrounded them. But there was a tension growing between them too, an awareness that showed itself in lingering glances and careful distances. Jackson was scrupulously proper, never touching her unless necessary, always sleeping in the main room while she occupied his bed. Yet Olivia often caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart race, and she knew her own face must reveal similar feelings. It came to a head one afternoon when she was in the garden and a rattlesnake appeared from under the squash plants. She froze, terrified, as the snake coiled and rattled its warning. Jackson came running from the barn where he had been working, grabbed her around the waist, and hauled her backward just as the snake struck at empty air where her foot had been. He killed the snake with his shovel in 2 quick, violent movements, then turned to her, still holding her tight against his chest. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough with fear. "No, I am fine. You got me away in time." She was shaking, her hands clutched in his shirt. "Olivia." He said her name like a prayer and a curse all at once. I cannot do this anymore. Do what? Pretend that I do not want you to stay forever. Pretend that I am not falling in love with you a little more every day. Pretend that the thought of you getting on that stagecoach and riding out of my life does not make me want to tear something apart. Her breath caught. Jackson. I know I have no right, he continued, the words tumbling out now that he had started. I know you have a life waiting for you in Tucson, obligations, plans. I know I am just a cowboy with nothing to offer but a rough house and a hard life. But God help me, Olivia, I have to say it. You belong here with me. I felt it that first morning and I feel it even stronger now. Stay. Please stay. Olivia pulled back enough to look up at his face, seeing the vulnerability there, the fear of rejection. She reached up and touched his cheek, feeling the stubble rough against her palm. You want to know why I have not asked you to take me to town, she said softly. Why I have let the days pass without making any move to leave. Why? Because I have been falling in love with you too, because this place feels more like home than anywhere I have ever been. Because when I imagine my future, all I can see is this house, this land, and you. His arms tightened around her. You mean that? Every word. He kissed her then, a fierce and tender claiming that made her dizzy. She kissed him back with all the longing she had been suppressing, rising on her toes to get closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. I will build you a bigger house, buy you books, learn to be the kind of man you deserve. Just marry me and stay. Yes, Olivia said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I will marry you. I do not need a bigger house or more books. I just need you. They held each other in the garden while the afternoon sun beat down and the mountains stood witness, two lonely souls who had found each other against all odds. The next day, Jackson hitched up his wagon and they rode into Wilcox together. The town was small but bustling, a main street lined with false-fronted buildings and a constant flow of cowboys, miners, and settlers moving through. Jackson drove straight to the telegraph office, where Olivia composed a message to her uncle explaining that she would not be coming to Tucson, that she had met someone and was going to be married. She felt a pang of guilt, but also relief. Her uncle would understand, or he would not, but either way, this was her choice. At the general store, Jackson insisted on buying Olivia fabric for a new dress, as well as supplies for the ranch. The proprietor, a gray-haired man named Samuel Pritchard, gave them a knowing look. Getting married, Wells. About time you found yourself a woman. Living out there alone is no good for a man. This is Olivia Jenkins, Jackson said, a note of pride in his voice. Soon to be Olivia Wells. Pleased to meet you, miss. You must be something special to catch our Jackson here. Most confirmed bachelor in the territory. I am the lucky one, Olivia said warmly. They arranged to be married the following Sunday by the circuit preacher who came through Wilcox twice a month. Jackson spent the week building Olivia a proper wardrobe and fixing up the bedroom, adding shelves for her things, and a mirror he bought from a family leaving the territory. Olivia worked on her dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and practiced her vows in whispered moments when Jackson was out with the cattle. The wedding itself was small but perfect. The preacher married them in the tiny church on the edge of town, with Samuel Pritchard and his wife serving as witnesses. Olivia wore wildflowers in her hair that Jackson had picked that morning, and when he slid his mother's gold ring onto her finger, his hands shook slightly. I never thought I would give this to anyone, he admitted quietly. Never thought I would want to. I will treasure it, Olivia promised. They had a simple meal at the hotel restaurant, a rare luxury that Jackson insisted on to make the day special. Then they drove back to the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon, husband and wife, ready to start their life together. That night, alone in their house, Jackson was almost shy as he helped Olivia with the buttons of her dress. She turned to face him, seeing the desire and tenderness warring in his expression. "I have never," she started, then stopped, blushing. "I know," he said gently. "We will go slow. I will never hurt you, Olivia, never." And he did not. He was patient and careful, introducing her to passion with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, listening to his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Olivia felt a peace she had never known. "No regrets?" Jackson asked quietly. "Not a single one. This is exactly where I am meant to be." The months that followed were hard work, but deeply satisfying. Olivia learned the rhythms of ranch life, discovering she had a talent for managing the practical side of the operation. She took over the accounts, organized their supplies more efficiently, and even helped with the cattle when Jackson needed an extra pair of hands. Her body grew stronger, her skin tanned from the sun, and she felt more vitally alive than she ever had in Philadelphia. Jackson, in turn, seemed to bloom under her care and company. He smiled more, laughed more, opened up about his past and his dreams for the future. At night, they would read together or simply talk, sharing the kind of intimate conversation that sustained love grows from. And in their bed, they discovered a physical compatibility that left them both breathless and amazed. "I never knew it could be like this," Olivia confessed one morning as they lay tangled together, the dawn light streaming through the window. "Like what? This complete. Like we are two parts of one whole." Jackson kissed her forehead. "I know exactly what you mean. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible." Winter came, bringing cold winds and occasional snow to the high desert. They spent long evenings by the fire, playing cards and planning improvements to the ranch. Jackson taught Olivia to shoot, insisting she needed to be able to protect herself when he was out on the range. She proved to be a surprisingly good shot, which amused them both. "Maybe you have some frontier woman in you after all," Jackson teased. "Or maybe I just have a good teacher," Olivia replied, kissing him. In early spring, Olivia began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first she thought it was something she ate, but when the nausea continued for a week, a different possibility occurred to her. She waited until she was certain before telling Jackson, choosing a warm evening when they were sitting on the porch together. "I have news," she said, taking his hand. He looked at her, immediately alert to the serious tone in her voice. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine. Jackson, I am going to have a baby." His face went through a series of expressions, shock to disbelief to a joy so profound it made her eyes sting with tears. He pulled her onto his lap, holding her carefully like she was made of glass. "A baby. We are going to have a baby in the fall, I think. Late September or early October. Olivia." He buried his face in her neck. "I do not have words. I never dared to hope for this much happiness. Are you pleased?" He pulled back to look at her incredulously. "Pleased? I am over the moon, terrified but over the moon. I do not know the first thing about being a father." "We will learn together," Olivia said. "Just like we have learned everything else." Jackson became even more protective during her pregnancy, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. Olivia had to fight to maintain some independence, insisting that she was pregnant, not ill. They compromised, with her handling the lighter chores and leaving the more strenuous work to him. As summer heated the land, they made preparations for the baby. Jackson built a cradle with his own hands, carving simple designs into the wood. Olivia sewed tiny clothes and blankets, working by lamplight when the day's heat finally broke. They argued good-naturedly about names, unable to agree on anything for weeks. "If it is a boy, I want to name him after my father," Jackson said. "James, James Wells. That is a strong name." "And if it is a girl, what was your mother's name?" Catherine Wells." Jackson tried it out. "I like it." In late August, they made a trip to Wilcox to stock up on supplies before the baby came. The town had grown in the year since their wedding, with new buildings going up and more families settling in the area. At the general store, they ran into Sarah Pritchard, Samuel's wife, who exclaimed over Olivia's condition. "You look wonderful, dear. Blooming. When are you due?" 6 weeks or so. "You will need help when your time comes. I have delivered many babies over the years. Send Jackson for me when the pains start." "Thank you," Olivia said gratefully. "I confess I have been worried about that aspect." "Nothing to worry about. You are young and healthy. It will go just fine." On the ride home, Jackson was quiet, his hands tight on the reins. "What are you thinking?" Olivia asked. "About you having the baby, about the risk. Women die in childbirth, Olivia. What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing will go wrong," she said firmly. "I am strong and we will have Sarah to help. You cannot think like that. I could not bear to lose you." "You will not lose me, I promise. We have too much life ahead of us for me to leave you now." He reached over and took her hand, holding it tight for the rest of the journey home. Labor began on a clear October morning when the aspens on the mountainside had turned to gold. Jackson rode hard to Wilcox and returned with Sarah Pritchard, who took one look at Olivia and declared it would be a while yet. Jackson paced the main room like a caged animal while Sarah and Olivia worked through the contractions in the bedroom. "First babies take their time," Sarah told Olivia calmly. "You are doing fine." It was long and difficult, stretching through the day and into the night. Jackson eventually convinced Sarah to let him come in, unable to bear being separated from Olivia any longer. He held her hand and wiped her forehead, whispering encouragement even as his heart broke to see her in pain. "I am sorry," Olivia gasped between contractions. "I am so sorry." "Sorry for what? You have nothing to be sorry for. You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known. Just hold on to me, I have got you." Finally, as the moon rose high outside the window, their son was born. The sound of his first cry filled the room, and Jackson felt something in his chest crack open. Sarah cleaned the baby and placed him in Olivia's arms, and they both stared down at the tiny, perfect person they had created. "James," Olivia whispered. "Hello, James." Jackson touched his son's small hand, watching the tiny fingers curl reflexively around his rough finger. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for this." Sarah stayed through the night to make sure both mother and baby were doing well, then left in the morning with instructions and promises to check back in a few days. Jackson barely left Olivia's side those first weeks, doing all the work to let her recover and bond with the baby. James was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. Jackson discovered he loved fatherhood, loved holding his son and singing to him in his rough voice, loved watching Olivia nurse him and seeing the fierce maternal love in her eyes. "He has your stubbornness," Olivia said one night as they watched James fight sleep, his little fists waving in the air. "And your intelligence, I hope," Jackson replied. "He will be his own person, the best of both of us." Life settled into a new normal, more tiring but infinitely richer. James grew quickly, hitting each milestone and keeping them constantly busy. When he was 6 months old and starting to sit up on his own, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. "Already," Jackson said, though he was grinning. "I suppose we were not as careful as we might have been," Olivia replied dryly. "I am not complaining. I love our family. The more the merrier." Their daughter arrived the following summer, an easier birth that left Olivia tired but triumphant. They named her Catherine after Olivia's mother, and she was a quieter baby than James had been, content to observe the world with serious blue eyes. "We have a pair now," Jackson said, holding Catherine while James toddled around the room. "Our house is getting crowded. Are you complaining?" "Not at all, but I think I need to build us that bigger house I promised you." Over the next 2 years, whenever he had spare time, Jackson worked on expanding their home. He added 2 bedrooms, a proper parlor, and a kitchen 3 times the size of the original. Olivia helped with the planning, and they created a house that felt spacious but comfortable, a true family home. The ranch prospered too. Jackson's careful management and Olivia's business sense combined to make the operation successful. They bought more land, expanded their herd, hired a cowhand to help with the work. Wilcox grew into a proper town, and the Arizona Territory began to feel less wild, more settled. James and Catherine grew from babies to toddlers to children, filling the house with noise and laughter. James had his father's steady nature and his mother's curiosity, always asking questions about everything he saw. Catherine was quieter but fiercely determined, tackling any challenge with a concentration that amused her parents. "She gets that from you," Jackson told Olivia. "The stubbornness. That is definitely from your side of the family." "I meant the determination, the refusal to give up." They raised their children with a combination of love and discipline, teaching them to work hard, to be kind, to value education and integrity. Olivia taught them to read early, filling their minds with stories and knowledge. Jackson taught them about the land, about animals, about the skills they would need to thrive in this place. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jackson took Olivia up into the mountains for a rare day alone, leaving the children with Sarah Pritchard. They rode to a high meadow where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color, and there they spread a blanket and lay together, looking up at the impossibly blue sky. "You ever regret it?" Jackson asked. "Giving up your plans for Tucson, your uncle's store, the life you might have had?" Olivia turned her head to look at him. "Not for a single second. This is the life I was meant to have. You are the man I was meant to love. I would not change anything. Even the hard parts, the isolation, the work, the danger, even those, they are part of what makes this real." "Jackson, that morning I stumbled onto your land, asking forgiveness for trespassing. I was lost in every way a person can be lost. And you told me I belonged here with you. That was the truest thing anyone has ever said to me. I belong here, I belong with you, and I always will." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and they made love there in the meadow with the mountains standing guard around them. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Jackson spoke softly. "I was lonely for so long before you came. I did not even realize how lonely until suddenly I was not anymore. You filled up all the empty places in me, Olivia. You and our children. I wake up every morning grateful that you were lost that night, that you ended up on my land instead of anywhere else." "It was fate," Olivia said. "It had to be. What are the odds that I would walk in exactly the right direction to find you? Divine intervention, maybe, or just dumb luck. Either way, I am grateful too." They rode back at sunset, golden light painting the landscape in shades of amber and rose. When they arrived home, James and Catherine ran out to greet them, and Jackson lifted both children at once, making them shriek with laughter. Olivia watched her family, her heart so full it ached. The years continued to pass, marked by small triumphs and occasional setbacks, but always moving forward. They had another son, Samuel, named after the shopkeeper who had been their first friend in Wilcox. Then a 4th child, Another girl they named Rose for her pink cheeks and sunny disposition. Their house rang with the sounds of childhood, with arguments and laughter, with lessons and play. Jackson taught the boys to work cattle and manage the land, passing on everything he knew. Olivia educated all the children, boys and girls alike, determined they would have every opportunity. Catherine showed a particular aptitude for numbers and helped her mother with the ranch accounts from a young age. James had his father's way with animals and could gentle the wildest horse with patience and calm. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. They acquired more land, built better outbuildings, imported breeding stock that improved their herd. Jackson's reputation as a fair and honest rancher spread, and he began to have influence in the county. When Arizona became a state in 1912, he was invited to the celebration in Phoenix, though he declined, preferring to stay home with his family. "I never had much use for politics," he told Olivia. "I would rather be here with you." Their children began to grow up and make their own choices. James, at 20, married a schoolteacher from Wilcox named Margaret, and they built a house on the northern section of the ranch. Catherine, at 18, announced her intention to attend normal school in Tucson, to become a teacher herself, a decision that thrilled Olivia even as it saddened her to see her daughter leave home. "She is so like you," Jackson said, watching Catherine pack her trunk. "Brilliant and determined and unafraid of the world." "She is stronger than I was at her age," Olivia replied. "She has you to thank for that. You raised her to believe she could do anything. We raised her, together." Samuel showed interest in medicine and began apprenticing with the new doctor in Wilcox, while Rose, the baby of the family at 15, declared she wanted to be a rancher like her father and showed no interest in leaving the land. "At least one of them wants to stay," Jackson said, though he was proud of all his children and their ambitions. Time continued its relentless march. They celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary, then their 25th. Jackson's hair turned gray at the temples, and lines deepened around his eyes, but to Olivia, he was as handsome as the day she had first seen him on his porch. Her own beauty matured into something richer, the soft prettiness of her youth transforming into striking elegance. They took to sitting on the porch in the evenings, as they had when they were first married, watching the sunset and talking about their day. The children were grown now, scattered but close, visiting often with grandchildren who filled the house with noise and chaos all over again. 6 grandchildren, Jackson marveled one evening after a particularly boisterous family dinner. "Can you believe it? And probably more on the way, knowing our family," Olivia replied with a smile. "We have been blessed, Jackson. More than blessed. I still think about that morning sometimes. You standing at my fence line, dusty and lost and apologizing for trespassing. What if I had sent you away? What if I had not seen what I saw in you? But you did see it. You told me I belonged here with you, and you were absolutely right. Best decision I ever made telling you that. Best decision I ever made was believing you." They held hands in the gathering dark, 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life of meaning and love. Around them, the ranch stretched away into the night, 3,000 acres that bore the mark of their labor and care. Inside the house, photographs lined the walls, chronicling decades of memories. Birthdays and Christmases, weddings and births, ordinary moments made precious by love. When Jackson was 62 and Olivia 60, they took a trip to San Francisco, something they had talked about for years but never done. They rode the train west, holding hands like young lovers, and spent a week exploring the rebuilt city. They ate in restaurants, attended the theater, walked along the waterfront and marveled at how much the world had changed since their youth. "It is exciting," Olivia admitted, "but I miss home." "Me too. Nothing wrong with adventure, but our place is back there with our family and our land." They returned to Arizona sunburned and happy, loaded with gifts for their children and grandchildren. Rose and her husband had managed the ranch flawlessly in their absence, and Jackson was proud to see how capable his youngest daughter had become. "This place will be in good hands when we are gone," he told Olivia that night. "Do not talk about being gone. We have many more years ahead of us." And they did. They grew old together gracefully, adapting to the changes in their bodies and the world around them with the same partnership that had characterized their marriage from the start. They celebrated their 40th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, a party that filled the house and spilled out into the yard. James, now in his early 40s with silver starting to show in his dark hair, stood to give a toast. "To my parents who taught us all what love looks like, what commitment looks like, what building a life together really means. You started with nothing but each other and you created all of this." He gestured to the assembled family. "You gave us roots and wings. You showed us how to work hard and love harder. We are all here because of your love story." Jackson stood and pulled Olivia to her feet, kissing her gently while their family cheered. "Your mother wandered onto my land 40 years ago, asking forgiveness for trespassing. I told her then that she belonged here with me. 40 years, 4 children, dozens of grandchildren and great-grandchildren later, that is still the truest thing I know. She belongs with me and I belong with her. Always have, always will." "Always," Olivia echoed, her eyes bright with tears. They danced that night, slowly circling the yard while musicians played and their family watched. Jackson held Olivia close, feeling the shape of her body against his, as familiar as his own after 4 decades of marriage. "No regrets?" he asked, the question he had asked so many times over the years. "Not a single one," she replied, the answer that was always the same. "This has been the most extraordinary life, Jackson, far better than any I could have imagined for myself." "It has been my honor," he said quietly, "to spend it with you." The seasons continued to turn, bringing changes both joyful and sorrowful. They lost friends, saw their children weather their own storms, celebrated new births and mourned deaths. Through it all, they remained each other's constant, the foundation that held when everything else shifted. On a warm spring morning in 1935, when Jackson was 75 and Olivia 73, they rode out to the high meadow where they had gone on their 5th anniversary. The ride took longer now, their bodies not as strong as they once were, but they made it to the top and sat together on a fallen log, looking out over the land they had worked for 50 years. "I want to be buried here," Jackson said suddenly. Olivia looked at him, startled. "What brought that on?" "Just thinking about the future. When my time comes, I want to rest in this place. It is where I proposed to you in a way, where we renewed our love so many times over the years. It feels right." "Then here it will be," Olivia said, taking his hand, "for both of us when the time comes. Together then, as we have been for everything else, together, always together." They sat in peaceful silence, watching the wind ripple through the grass and the clouds sail across the endless sky. Below them, the ranch spread out like a patchwork quilt, the house and barns and corrals, the herds of cattle grazing on the rich grass. Beyond that, Wilcox had grown into a proper town, connected to the wider world by railroad and telegraph and telephone. The wild frontier of their youth had been tamed, transformed into something more settled and safe. "You miss it?" Olivia asked. "The old days when this was still wild country?" Jackson considered the question carefully. "Sometimes, But mostly no, that wildness was lonely. Now we have family everywhere, friends, community. The land has not changed, not really. It is still beautiful, still challenges us, but we do not have to face it alone anymore. We never faced it alone. We always had each other. True enough. That made all the difference. They rode back slowly as the afternoon lengthened, arriving home to find Rose waiting with news that another grandchild had been born, this time to Samuel's oldest daughter. They celebrated with a quiet dinner. 3 generations gathered around the table, and Jackson found himself overwhelmed with gratitude for the fullness of his life. That night, lying in bed beside Olivia, he held her hand in the darkness. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For everything. For saying yes when I asked you to marry me, for giving me our children, for building this life with me, for loving me all these years, for trespassing on my land that morning and changing everything." Olivia laughed quietly. "I think I should be thanking you for not sending me away." "I could never have sent you away. From the moment I saw you, I knew. You belonged here with me. I did, I do, I always will." They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, 2 souls who had found their home in each other and never let go. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead. The same stars that had looked down on them as young lovers, as new parents, as grandparents, as aged partners who had weathered everything life could throw at them and emerged stronger for it. The years continued to pass with increasing speed, as they do when one grows old. Jackson and Olivia moved more slowly, needed more help with the daily work of living, but their minds remained sharp and their love undimmed. They spent their days in comfortable routine, mornings on the porch, afternoons with visiting family, evenings reading together or simply sitting in companionable silence. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in the summer of 1938, a milestone few couples reached. The entire family gathered again, now grown so large that they had to rent the church hall in Wilcox to fit everyone. Telegrams arrived from friends and acquaintances across Arizona and beyond, congratulating them on their long marriage. During the party, their oldest grandson, James and Margaret's firstborn, now a man of 30 with children of his own, asked them the secret to staying married so long. Jackson and Olivia looked at each other, that long look of communication that needed no words. "Choose each other," Olivia said finally. "Every single day choose each other, when it is easy and when it is hard, when you want to and when you do not. Keep choosing. And remember why you fell in love in the first place," Jackson added. "Do not let the daily grind make you forget the magic that brought you together." "Was it magic that brought you together?" the grandson asked. "Might as well have been," Jackson replied. "Your grandmother was lost in the desert, nearly dead from exhaustion, and somehow she ended up at my door. If she had walked in any other direction, if I had not been home that morning, if I had not had the sense to ask her to stay, none of this would exist. All of you are here because of that one miraculous morning." "It was not magic," Olivia said, squeezing his hand. "It was fate. We were always meant to find each other." That winter was particularly cold, and both Jackson and Olivia felt its bite more than in previous years. They spent more time inside, close to the fire, wrapped in blankets and each other. Their children worried, but they insisted they were fine, just feeling their age. Spring came eventually, as it always did, bringing warmth back to the high desert. On one of the first truly warm days, they rode out to their meadow one last time. It took them most of the morning to make the journey, but neither complained. When they reached the top, they sat together in the sun, holding hands and breathing in the clear mountain air. "It is still beautiful," Olivia said. "It is," Jackson agreed, "though not as beautiful as you." She laughed, the sound like music. "You are biased. Absolutely. And I have earned the right to be after 50 years. They stayed until the shadows grew long, then began the slow journey home. Halfway down the mountain, Jackson stopped his horse and looked back at the meadow, a strange expression on his face. "What is it?" Olivia asked. "Just fixing it in my memory. Want to be able to recall it perfectly when I need to." That night, Jackson did not wake up. Olivia found him in the morning, peaceful in his sleep, his hand still stretched toward her side of the bed as if reaching for her. The doctor said his heart had simply stopped, worn out after 78 years of beating. The funeral was immense, drawing people from across the territory. Jackson Wells had been respected and loved, a pillar of his community, a man who had lived with integrity and kindness. They buried him in the high meadow as he had requested, with a simple stone marker that read, "Jackson Wells, 1857–1939. Beloved husband, father, grandfather." He found where he belonged. Olivia stood at the graveside, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them there, because of the love she and Jackson had shared. She did not cry during the service, saving her tears for later when she was alone. That night, she sat on the porch where they had spent so many evenings together, and she talked to him as if he could hear. "I am not ready to be without you," she said quietly. 50 years together, and it still was not enough. It never could have been enough. But she was not without him. Not really. He was in every board of the house they had built together, in every fence line they had ridden, in every child and grandchild that bore his features and his character. He was woven into the fabric of her life so completely that separation was impossible. Olivia lived for another 5 years, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. She spent her days with her family, telling stories about Jackson, making sure the grandchildren and great-grandchildren knew the kind of man their grandfather had been. She wrote down their story, filling notebooks with her careful script, wanting future generations to understand what had brought them all into being. On a spring morning in 1944, Olivia died peacefully in her sleep, just as Jackson had. Her last words, spoken to Rose, who was sitting with her, were, "Tell him I am coming. Tell him to wait for me." They buried her next to Jackson in the high meadow, her marker reading, "Olivia Jenkins Wells, 1865–1944. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she found where she belonged." At the funeral, James stood and told the story one more time, the story that had become family legend. About a lost woman who stumbled onto a lonely cowboy's land, asking forgiveness for trespassing. About the cowboy who told her she belonged there with him. About the 50 years of love and partnership that followed, the family that grew from that unlikely meeting, the legacy that would continue for generations. "They are together again now," he said, looking up at the mountains. "Wherever they are together, as they were always meant to be." The family lingered at the graveside after the service, reluctant to leave. The meadow was in full bloom, wildflowers covering the ground in every color imaginable. A soft breeze stirred the grass, and for a moment everyone felt it, a presence, a peace, a sense that Jackson and Olivia were truly there, watching over them all. Rose, now in her 60s and running the ranch with her husband and children, placed her hand on her mother's marker. "We will take care of it," she promised. "Everything you and Dad built, we will honor it and preserve it. Your love story will live on." And it did. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter while remembering the foundation that had been laid. The house still stood, expanded and updated but fundamentally unchanged. The high meadow remained a sacred place, where couples would go to renew their vows or simply to sit and feel the enduring power of Jackson and Olivia's love. Their story was told and retold, a testament to the transformative power of love, to the way two lonely souls can find each other against impossible odds and build something that outlasts their mortal lives. Children grew up hearing about their brave great-great-grandmother who had wandered lost in the desert, and their kind great-great-grandfather who had seen in her not a trespasser but his destiny. The world changed around them, but some things remained constant. The Arizona sun still rose over those mountains every morning, painting the desert in shades of gold and rose. The land still demanded hard work and gave back beauty and belonging in return. And somewhere in the high meadow where wildflowers bloomed eternal, two souls rested together, their love story complete but never ending. Because true love, the kind that Jackson and Olivia shared, does not end with death. It lives on in the family they created, in the land they nurtured, in the community they served, in the countless small kindnesses they showed each other and the world. It lives on in the story of a woman who came to ask forgiveness for trespassing, and the lonely cowboy who told her she belonged there with him, and the beautiful truth that proved to be. They had found where they belonged, not in a place but in each other, and that belonging had sustained them through joy and sorrow, through the raising of children and the building of a legacy, through 50 years of daily choosing and being chosen. It was a simple story in many ways, two people falling in love and staying in love, but in its simplicity lay its power. Because in the end, that is what we all seek. To belong, to be seen and known and loved, to find that one person who looks at us and says, without hesitation or doubt, "You belong here with me." Jackson and Olivia had been fortunate enough to find that, and wise enough to recognize it and courageous enough to fight for it every single day of their lives together. Their story became a touchstone for the family, a reminder of what marriage could be at its best, of what love looked like when it was allowed to deepen and mature over decades. Young couples would visit the graves in the meadow before their own weddings, asking for blessing and guidance. Old couples would go there on anniversaries, remembering their own beginnings and renewing their own commitments. The ranch prospered through wars and depressions, through droughts and floods, through all the upheavals of the 20th century. Each generation added something new while preserving the core of what Jackson and Olivia had built. The values they had instilled remained: hard work, integrity, kindness, the importance of family and community, the sacred trust of stewarding the land for future generations. And on quiet evenings when the work was done and families gathered on porches across the ranch, someone would inevitably start the story again. About the morning in 1888 when Olivia Jenkins stumbled across the border of Jackson Wells's land, dusty and exhausted, apologizing for trespassing. About Jackson seeing past her bedraggled appearance to the strong, intelligent woman beneath. About him saying those words that changed everything: "You belong here with me." About her choosing to believe him, to stay, to build a life in a harsh land with a gentle man. About the love that grew between them, steady and strong as the mountains, deep and life-giving as the hidden springs that fed the desert. About the family they created and the legacy they left, proof that sometimes, when you are lost and afraid, the best thing you can do is trust the voice that says you are exactly where you are meant to be. And so the story lived on, told and retold, embroidered with details and polished smooth by repetition, but at its heart always the same: a love story, a Western romance, a testament to the power of two people choosing each other and building something that would outlast them both. Jackson and Olivia Wells, who proved that belonging is not about a place, but about finding the person who makes anywhere feel like home, who showed that true love is not a fairy tale but a daily practice, a commitment renewed each morning when you wake up and choose all over again. Their graves in the high meadow stood as a monument to that choice, and to the beautiful life it made possible. And if you sat there quietly on a spring morning when the wildflowers were blooming, you might feel it still, the echo of their love, the whisper of Jackson's voice saying, "You belong here with me," and Olivia's reply, "Always and forever I do." This was how a love story should end, not with death but with legacy, not with sadness but with gratitude, not with an ending but with continuation. Because Jackson and Olivia's love had not ended when their mortal lives did. It lived on in every person who carried their blood, in every acre of land that bore their mark, in every telling of their story that reminded others what love could accomplish when it was given room to grow and time to deepen, and the courage to persist through whatever challenges arose. They had started with nothing but each other and had ended with everything that mattered. A family that loved them, a land that sustained them, a community that respected them, and a love story that would be told for generations. They had found where they belonged together, and in that belonging had created something far greater than either of them could have achieved alone. This was their gift to all who came after. This proof that love endures, that commitment matters, that choosing each other every day for a lifetime is not only possible, but the most worthwhile endeavor a human can undertake. Jackson and Olivia Wells, who met by chance and loved by choice, who built a life and left a legacy, who proved that sometimes the best thing you can say to someone is the simplest, "You belong here with me."